What kind of poem are you? That's the subject before the house this morning. What kind of poem are you? It comes in this way from this 10th verse of Ephesians 2. We are God's workmanship, created in Jesus Christ for good works. And I'll get to the poem part in a minute, but I wanted you to see how much fun this kind of text is to preach for a homiletician or a preacher. We are God's workmanship. Oh, this one's going to be easy to preach. I mean, I can do all kinds of things with this. God is the potter, we are the clay. In 1 Corinthians 3:9, we are God's building, that God is building. It was the summer of 1973. The country was England, and Jane and I were making our way around the English countryside from cathedral to cathedral, from spire to spire. Each one a mute testimony to the reality of God amidst a bustling, busy, secular world all around. There's something majestic and powerful about a cathedral like this one. Something that lasts and even withstands a fire, as it did here in this place years ago. There's a kind of holy hush when you walk into a beautiful cathedral like this. The strands of light breaking across here and there. I came in the other day after work and everyone else had gone, and it was darker in here, but there was still light outside. Have you ever been in here when the lights are all turned off and you see the windows pop with beauty of the light from outside? There's something powerful and majestic about a cathedral. Something that lasts in a world where hardly anything lasts. The poet Heine stands before the Cathedral of Amiens in France. Maybe you've been there. You know how beautiful it is. He's standing there with a friend, and they are just admiring the awe and beauty of the place. And finally, the friend asks, why can't human beings build like this anymore? And Heine replies, well, back then, humans had convictions. All we moderns have is opinions. And it takes more than an opinion to build a cathedral, he said. Oh, this one's going to be easy to preach, I thought. We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. And then I began to look at the biblical text. I began to look at the Greek text, and I realized the word for workmanship here is poema, and it came alive for me. Oh, I remember making the students have to learn the verb form of that, poieo, which is one of the contract verbs. You know, there are three kinds of contract verbs: agapao, which is I love. We get agape from, and plerao, which is I fulfill, and then this one, poieo, I make, or I do. I love that word. You know how many languages have one word for make and do? In French, it's faire. In Spanish, it's hacer. In Russian, it's dalet. But in ancient Greek, it's poema. So in essence, what Paul is saying in here is kind of what this NRSV is trying to say. We are what God has made, but I don't think the NRSV picks it up quite enough, because it's not just in the past. It's almost like the perfect tense in Greek, which talks about something that happened in the past, something that's happening now, and something that continues on into the future. It is, we are what God is making and will continue to make until the very end of our lives. So I'm looking at this and I'm getting excited. I know I can preach this. We are what God has made. And then suddenly I realized this word poema is the same word that Aristotle uses in his Poetics to describe poems. This is the word from which we get our word poem in English. So do you get what's going on here? Paul is actually saying we are God's poems, created in Christ Jesus for good works. Wow. Did you ever think of yourself as one of God's poems? Do you ever think of yourself as a work of art? I'm not talking about family members and friends who say you're a real piece of work. No. You'll hear that from some people. No, I'm talking about Shakespeare's Hamlet, who says, what a piece of work is man. And woman, we should add. Or the psalmist in the passage Lucy read earlier. We are made imago Dei. We are made in God's image. We are just a little lower than angels to be crowned with glory and honor. We are special. We are God's poems. Don't you get this? You are more than just a collection of your body parts and your DNA. You're more than your social security number, more than your resume. We are God's poems, created in Christ Jesus for good works. But what kind of poems do you think Paul might have had in mind? I want to suggest 3 kinds of poems this morning that those of us who try to live the Christian life find ourselves living. And the first has to do with limericks. You know what limericks are like. Limericks are, light and fun, and they're frivolous. But often, those of us who live like limericks are the ones who just say whatever we want to say, and we don't care who we hurt. We don't care what we do. We just put them out there, like the man who put on his wife's epitaph, "Here lies my wife, here let her lie. Now she's at rest, and now so am I." That's terrible. Why would you put that on an epitaph? It's a kind of a limerick. Another one that's much shorter. Man's first wife dies, she's buried, he remarries, he's talking to the funeral director. The director says, "You've only got 2 plots, you now need a 3rd one for your new wife. And by the way, where do you want to be buried?" And he thinks for a moment and he says, "Well, put me in between them, but tilt me toward Tilly." In this story, I'm glad we don't know which one is Tilly, but the point I'm making is that limericks like to just say whatever they want. It's just all out there, and they don't know, who they're hurting or offending. They don't really care much about political correctness, and they have a lighter view of Christianity. There's nothing weighty or substantive about limericks. In fact, they are pretty self-centered. They don't really care about others very much. They don't care about the poor or the suffering. They're just kind of focused on themselves. I don't think it's such a good idea to be a limerick. As much fun as it might be. Limericks do not communicate very well. They don't know how to focus. They don't know how to pay attention to what's going on around them. Like the story of the young executive who was leaving work late one night, and he saw the CEO standing in front of the shredder. And the CEO said, "Hey, you, come here. I've got a very sensitive and important document here, and my administrative assistant's gone home for the day. Do you know how to make this machine work?" "Oh, yes, sure, I sure do," said the young executive, glad he could help the CEO. And he took the document and he watched it disappear into the machine. And the CEO said, "Great, thanks. I just need 1 copy." Think about that one, it'll come to you. Some people don't communicate very well. And some of you actually got that one. I'll let you laugh a little more. And some people, they just aren't paying attention to what's going on around. That's a limerick. I hope you're not that kind of poem. The second kind of poem are sonnets, and sonnets are very beautiful and lovely, but they're also very tightly written with certain rhythm and meter. They're so tightly rhythmed, they hardly have room to maneuver. They hardly have room to breathe. They may seem perfect from the outside, but they may not be doing so well on the inside. Anne Lamott writes, "Everyone is screwed up, broken, clingy, and scared, even those who seem to have it more or less together." So do not try to compare your insides with their outsides, because actually their insides may be the same. Why? Because they are trying to make it on their own. They think they can make it without God. Rabbi Kushner writes, who needs God? And of course, then he answers it beautifully. But there are many secular people in our world today. I don't need God. I don't need Christianity. If the first group, the limericks, have a kind of lighter view of God, they don't take Christianity seriously. The second group, the sonnets, take themselves way too seriously. They think they have accomplished everything all by themselves and that God hasn't had anything to do with any of it. Now here's another word we all know, onomatopoeia. That actually comes from, guess it, you guessed, two Greek words, onoma, which means name, and poia, that poieo word from which our word workmanship comes, make a name. And that's what sonnets like to do. They want to make a name for themselves. And when they do without God, they find, like the Babel Tower builders, they find themselves in trouble eventually. See, part of the problem with sonnets is, people who are sonnets, is they want everything perfect, everything exactly in place. And if it's slightly out of place, it just throws them off completely. They live, in many ways, with a kind of sin of arrogance and pride, like the Pharisees, and they live with a kind of hell of perfectionism. Maybe it's because of someone around them. Maybe their parents expect them to be perfect in every single thing they do. I have known some people in Texas and here and around different places who live with the hell of perfectionism because their parents wanted them always to be so perfect. And in fact, their parents are deceased, but they're still living with it. That's a tough place to be. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's a friend or a coworker or a boss who expects you to be perfect on everything you do. In the 5 o'clock service a few months ago, I shared a story of a preacher who was preaching on perfectionism and told how Jesus was the only perfect person who ever lived. In fact, he challenged the congregation, has anyone here ever known anyone who was perfect? Not expecting anyone to say anything, but an older gentleman stood up at the second pew and, kind of like right where you are right now. I'm not picking you out, but he stood up right there, and the preacher said, you've known someone who's perfect? And the old man said, yeah. He said, who? My wife's first husband. That's a pretty good one, and then I knew I couldn't just use it at 5 o'clock. I had to use it here too. Sonnets are people who live with the hell of perfection. So you don't want to be a sonnet. So there's only one choice left. I actually think what Paul is talking about here is free verse. Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, Ezra Pound, most of the 20th century, free verse. Why is free verse good? Because you have some room to maneuver. You have some room to breathe. There's room, theologically, for free will, right? In the context of the larger ultimate will of God, so that God kind of knows where it's going, but you still have choices. You can still make choices. You make mistakes. God picks you up. In free verse, God is writing new lines in your poem. God may even be crossing out lines, and you have twists and turns in your life, and you're not even sure where it's all going, but you know, if you are living in the providence of God, that you see God's unfolding script for your life coming day after day. You see it every day. We don't have to be, Homer or Keats or Browning or Yeats or Robert Frost. We don't have to be that. God is making something of our poem. Just to mix metaphor slightly, most of us will look at a slab of stone and all we see is a slab of stone. But Michelangelo looks at a slab of stone and he sees a David hidden there. Imagine what God is seeing inside you and me as God looks at our lives. So God is writing our poems, God is changing them. So we don't have to be epics or ballads, even though altogether, all of our poems create the great epic of human history, especially with the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, completing that great cosmic story. No, we don't have to be some big poem. And think about it this way. Your individual poems are not just little, throwaways to be discarded on the trash heap of history. No, if you can make a difference in at least one other person's life, then your poem will have been worthwhile. This past week, I had the honor and the privilege of visiting our Fresh Air Farm and seeing the wonderful young children who are there in our STAIR program. And I thought, look at what God is doing. Look at the amazing thing God is doing with the lives who are there, transforming them, making them something more than they would have been if they hadn't been in this program. In fact, a good branding for this program would be changing lives, one life at a time. Imagine what God is doing with their lives. But imagine also what God is doing with the poems of your lives, even here. Or what, in a larger scale, what God is doing with a poem of IPC. I mean, this is a poem that we are all helping write, but it is God who's doing something with it. How does that old poem put it? "'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin, but held it up with a smile. 'What am I bidding, good folks?' he cried. 'Who will start the bidding for me? $1, $1. Who'll make it $2? $2, $2. Who'll make it $3? $3 once, $3 twice.' Going for 3, but no. From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow, and wiping the dust off the old violin and tightening the loosened strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as an angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, 'Now what am I bid for the old violin?' and held it up with the bow. $1,000. Who'll make it 2? 2,000. Who'll make it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice. Going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, 'We do not quite understand what changed its worth.' The man replied, 'The touch of the master's hand.' And many a soul with life out of tune and battered and scarred with sin is auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and we travel on. We're going once, we're going twice, we're going, and we're almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd can never quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the master's hand. Dear friends, we're all just works in progress, aren't we? That's all we are. If we were buildings or roads, the sign next to each one of us would say, "Be patient, still under construction." We are God's poems. How does that old gospel song put it? "God's still working on me to make me what I ought to be. Took him just a week to make the moon and the stars, the sun and the earth, Jupiter and Mars. How loving and patient God must be, for God's still working on me." We are God's poems, created in Christ Jesus for good works in God's world. So, be the poems that God has called you to be. God bless you all.